go. Can you hear the music okay?
Oh, I can hear it. It's loud.
Let me turn that back down just a little bit. It's probably a little too loud. Oh, dude, what a week.
Oh, I know.
What a week. There's just like so much stuff that has come out this week. In addition to us both getting ready to fly out to Vegas, you tomorrow, me on Sunday.
Oh yeah.
We had Stranger Things has been running lately, and my wife and I just caught up on Stranger Things last night. What's wild is there's like 7 episodes or 6 episodes available, something like that, in Netflix right now. I don't know if you've been watching it this season, but each episode is like an hour and 20 minutes to an hour and 40 minutes. And the episode it left off at right now, there are 2 more that come out in July. They basically released them up to episode 7, then they give a break for a month, and then the final 2 episodes come out in July, and each one of those is almost 2 hours long.
I would not be against doing like a Stranger Things episode of the Kessel chat. Like,
oh my gosh. Between Obi-Wan and Stranger Things already, like my feels have just been like ripped in every direction, because Stranger Things this season has already been like substantially more intense than the previous seasons. Like, they're all good. They're all really good. But this season has just been like, oh man, it's just tugging everywhere. And then of course Kenobi on top of that. I did not get a chance to watch Miss Marvel this week, so I am a little bummed about that, but I'm hoping to watch Miss Marvel tonight.
I have not watched Miss Marvel yet. I am, and that's why I'm wearing my shirt, is I've been keeping up to date with Strange New Worlds.
It's
Strange
great.
New Worlds is,
I
love that show.
It.
Yeah,
dude.
It's a lot of fun. It's like light, fun science fiction. It is, I think anytime you're doing a prequel series like that, the hardest thing is making something feel old, but new again. And this does a great blend of the two. And there's also another thing, which is I think it's really hard to find actors that are like just pull you right in. That just like, man, this person is this role. And all the people, and again, I know that this is not the Strange New Worlds chat, but every actor that's on that show, I thoroughly enjoy. I actually just got done today watching the latest episode. And I'm kind of got mixed feelings, and it's a weird intersection.
I'm not totally caught up yet, though. I'm not totally caught up yet, though.
It's a weird intersection with a thing that I think that Star Trek is handled it actually amazingly well. And I'm not even going to talk about the episode. You can watch it. You can watch this latest episode. It's episode 6 of Strange New Worlds. I will not spoil it, but it is when you are done watching it, you will have a lot of feelings. And what I would recommend is going and doing a Google search for Strange New Worlds episode 6 and literary reference.
Okay.
And that's because it's borrowing from this amazing story, this amazing story from the 1970s that I read when I was an English major. And it is a gut punch of a story. And if I tell you the name of the story, it's Peter Benchley's Jaws. No. If I tell you the name of the story, it'll, and you know it, and a lot of people know it. It'll take away a thing that's inherent to the episode, and it's a really interesting dichotomy because I'm starting to walk a line with the Obi-Wan show. There's a lot that I like, but there's a thing that they're doing that I'm like, I don't know. Mm-hmm. This has to be something. We need to go somewhere on this.
Yeah.
But I can't wait to get into tonight's episode.
I agree. On Strange New Worlds, the thing I've been loving about it, one, it's just good TV. Like, it's been just great TV. Yeah. But something I love about the style of filming for the show is that Next Generation did this, but I'm realizing it did it in a way that actually disconnected me from the show for the most part. And I think it's the bridge. So in what I remember in Next Generation, for the most part, the show would kind of start off with the Enterprise in space, someone saying Captain's log or some other log, star date, numbers. And then it would usually either pan to somebody doing something, or to go to the bridge and people on the bridge doing their job and checking meters and numbers and all the kind of happy stuff. And what that wasn't every single time. But what I do really love about Strange New Worlds is that it's like we're following a story just like we were following with Next Generation. But the difference being, at least that I notice, is we pick up on a story that's already happening. So it's almost like watching The Watcher in Marvel's What If, but they're only on one timeline, and he's opening a door that's either jumping 5 days ahead or 30 seconds ahead or some other period of time ahead, and we're catching a story. We get to see the entire story, but we're not catching it right at the beginning of the story. We're catching it just slightly into the story, just like a half a bubble into the story, enough to make you feel like some stuff had already happened. But the things of like Captain Zog, I answer them out sitting there saying, Captain Zog, stardate, blah, 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 stars fly by. Let's talk for a couple of minutes and then we'll get into it. It's like, no, they're into the story. And I really like that because it makes me feel like I'm sitting in and going, oh, wow, okay, we've got a thing going on here. All right. And for me, at least, I really appreciate that.
I love that. No, I love that because so all my cards on the table. I'm a big fan of certain tropes of Star Trek. Star Trek's been around for more than 50 years, so it's got tropes itself. One of those is the Captain's Log. I feel like this is going to be a crazy comparison. So Shakespeare often had a character come out at the start of plays to set the stage. And it was literally that. It was a character whose whole job was to come out was to kind of set the setting of what the play was. And you can even see that in like Romeo and Juliet, two households alike in dignity. It's a character, and that's what the Captain's Log is. It does that. It really sets it up. But a thing that I really like, and by the way, I like that on a lot of shows, you get these overarching series arcs, like these storylines that play out over 6, 8, or 10 episodes. I like that. I'm not saying that we should go away from that. But the thing I do like about Strange New Worlds, and I think that's because this fits with Star Trek better, maybe minus Deep Space Nine, is it's episodic television. So you don't really need to know a lot of what happened in the previous episode. You're just jumping right in. It's like a river that's already running and you just jump right into it. And the thing that I like about the Captain's Log is it tells you basically what you need to know before you get into it. And what's also great is they're doing a thing that Next Generation did really well, which is every episode is centered around a character. So rather than have a plot-driven story where the plot happens and the characters have to react, it's a character-driven story where the characters are making choices and then that's altering the plot. And I don't know if you're all the way up to like the last, not this episode.
No,
that just
I think I'm like 4
week.
or 5. I think so the episode I left off at is spoiler alert, apologize, is the virus on the ship. That's where I left off. I just finished that.
Great. Yeah. It's an outbreak episode, and that episode is all based around the first officer, Una Chin Riley. Or for non-canon people, Morgan Primus. The next two episodes, Jeff, are pretty unbelievable. Yeah. The 5th episode is comedy, and it's hard to write comedy, and I laughed so often, and I'm not one that just like, oh yeah, that was funny. Like episode 5 of Strange New Worlds is like one of my favorite Star Trek's episodes in 25 years. Like I really enjoyed that episode. It was a lot of fun.
Right on. Yeah. Awesome. Shall we get into the Kessel chat, not the Star Trek?
Yes. Punch it. Let's do it. We can make a start.
Hey, dude. How's it going? We are here.
It's going okay. Yeah.
It is. So we started off kind of talking about Star Trek and Stranger Things and all that, but tonight on the show we're getting into Kenobi episode 4, and I think there's a lot to talk about. Well, there's always a lot to talk about with Kenobi, but hopefully tonight's gonna be a little bit different because the last couple episodes we've watched of Kenobi have been rough. They've been hard to watch, like rough in a good way, like so emotional in so many different ways that they've just been tough to follow. But before we get into that, bearing the lead. Thanks everyone for being here. We really appreciate it. If you don't mind, drop a little subscription. It really helps us out. Throw a little thumbs up thing on the channel. It super helps us get bubbled up, and we love you being here. And also remember to drop in the live chat. If you're here with us right now, drop in the live chat, say hi, let us know what about the episode 4 or any of the episodes of Kenobi you're excited about, and maybe any fan theories you have about upcoming episodes. But to that note, let's go back to Kenobi itself. I wanted to open up this time. I'm going to ask you a question this time because you're usually asking me when we kick things off, but I'm going to ask you something. The last couple episodes, they've been hard. And you expressed the last time we watched, the last show that we did, you expressed that it's been especially hard on kids. And without putting too many words in your mouth, it's been hard on kids in so much that we're really seeing what this galaxy is like for children. Not just the Obi-Wan story and the Empire and all that, but just in general, what it's like on children's lives, how it affects them, all those things. And so for this most recent episode, my question for you is, how did this feel any different to you, related to children, related to kids, than the previous ones? If so, how? If it didn't, also kind of expand on that a little bit.
Okay. So this is where I was talking before on the pre-show when we were getting together here. So, like, for background, for anybody that didn't catch the last 2 episodes, my concern when I saw the very first episode, the first episode came out, I think it was the same week as that terrible incident in Uvalde, Texas, which I'm sure people have been following in the news. Regardless of how you feel about laws and gun control, as a human, your heart goes out to people. As a parent, that's my brood right back there. I got a lot of them. As a parent, it's always, you're always thinking of the safety of your children, and you work really hard to try to keep your children safe in the world and help give them the best opportunity that they have. And, Jeff, you're a parent, and I don't want to speak for you, but I think that parents uniformly, if you're doing your job right, you're making sure that they go to bed safe, they wake up safe, they feel safe. And, the first episode of Obi-Wan came out with that. There was it really just like hit me in maybe a political way, but it hit me at an emotional core, which was to see those kids running from violence being perpetrated by the stormtroopers. Like, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to get right down into the weeds on this.
No, do it, man.
Their teacher is trying to protect them. Again, you think of the time, and I know that no one knew that was when that episode was going to come out, but that's when it came out. And then you keep advancing through this story, and you have Leia, and by the way, we're going to be talking spoilers, so if you're not up to date on the latest episode of I was about to say Strange New Worlds, of Obi-Wan, of the Obi-Wan, this is the warning. But so after we see this like crazy incident of violence where Jedi younglings are trying to like just survive, we then kind of cut to the vulnerability of Luke. We cut to the vulnerability of a young Jedi, and then Leia being kidnapped. And I was just like, wow, like, where is this going? Like, like this is a lot on kids. Then we go to the planet where Leia is being held, and there's a mother who is negotiating with Kumail, Nanjiani's character, who's faking as a Jedi, and this woman and her child are vulnerable and in danger, and it just seemed like we were just running through this like series of like what it is to be a vulnerable child. Obi-Wan is walking through the streets, and he's saying, "I'm looking for this child. She's been kidnapped. She's my, I think he says she's my daughter." And the actress who he's talking to says, I was somebody's daughter once too. And again, it's like we're, because she's a vulnerable youth, you know, and so we just keep spending a lot of time on this vulnerable, the vulnerable nature of childhood, and the adults that need to be there to protect, help, and support children. And again, like, I don't know, maybe this is just me being a parent, but man, this theme was really playing up in the last couple episodes, and I've been like, I don't know where they're going with this. And this episode played it in a way that I'm now, this is what I mean by, Jeff, I'm on a line. I don't know where they're going with this, and I hope that, and we're on episode 4, and if I'm right, there's only 6 episodes. So I'm really interested in seeing if this has to do with some type of trauma, because Obi-Wan talks about his childhood, about being taken from the Jedi. I remember my mother. I remember her shawl. I remember my father's hands. There was a baby. I think I had a brother. These are all like these childhood stories. And so now we're in an episode, this week's episode 4. And there were 2 things that I was like, where is this going with this storyline? And one of them was Leia, a child, is interrogated and put into a potential torture machine. And then, and I don't mean to jump into this reveal, Obi-Wan is walking through a hall of what looks like Jedi in amber.
Oh,
like they're all, and some of them I recognized, like from the Clone Wars cartoons. Some of them I thought were from the video games that are like Fallen Order. I was like, oh, I know these Jedi. And then there's a Jedi youngling that's there with their helmet, and they're in amber. And I'm just like, what? At this point, these are deliberate choices. There is something that this show wants to talk about in terms of the vulnerability of essentially the smallest among us, the ones that are the most vulnerable, which are kids. And I'm just now I'm like, where is this going? Yeah. So you I know this is a long way to get to this answer, but that is where there were a lot of things that I really liked about this episode, and I could go into them. I mean, so many things. I can't even tell you. I even liked the trench coat stuff where they're like escaping in a trench coat. Like, I love that stuff. But this is a serious thing, and I don't know. It's almost like they're playing with fire right now, because it's like, you guys this has to mean something now at this point. Because if you're just doing it to get a rise out of me, that's a cheap rise, and I don't like that.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I felt the exact same way watching that scene, because every single time, we started the entire series off with... Sorry, I wrote something down real quick. We started the entire series off with kids, with younglings, being taught by a Jedi in the Jedi Temple. And before I go any further, because I should have done this already, let's just put this up here for everybody. If you haven't caught it already, and I'm sorry if we have spoiled anything for you, there will be continuous spoilers to the rest of the show. Stop! It's a tarp. Just leave now and come back later if you need to.
I will say, that's why I stopped a little while ago, and I said, hey, like, I'm gonna be talking about this stuff, so this is, we're gonna get into all these episodes.
In this episode, or we start the whole series off with kids, and then it centers around Obi-Wan saving a kid. And then to your point, we see what I was hearing it referred to on TikTok and other places was the trophy room, is the room with all the Jedi encased. Not just encased in amber or in stasis in some way. Like, all of them have their eyes open in surprise. All of them.
Yes.
And that was, I think, the most impactful part of that to me, is they're not just encased in some way. And I was looking at them as they were going through. There was no blaster burns or saber burns that were obvious. I'm going to go back and watch it a couple more times, and I want to see. But I didn't see any obvious, like, they were stabbed through or sliced by a lightsaber or whatever, where they're dead. Or the faces were not those of like in agony. They were sort of in surprise. And then they're flashed. Almost like being caught in surprise in Carbonite is sort of what it reminded me
Yes.
of. And it really made me think of, this is a trophy room. This is a testament to what they've been able to do, that they were able to capture Jedi and store them someplace without having to kill them. And they can bring them back whenever they want to do things to, potentially to torture or to try to convert to the dark side or whatever it is they want to do. That's the sense that I got. And I'm with you. The fact that it stopped at the very end on a child, that means something. There's a reason Filoni and Deborah Chow and the others who are part of the either production, Ewan McGregor. Wow, I even could call him Obi-Wan. Ewan McGregor as one of the executive producer, I think, of the show. Like, all of these people are not making these creative choices for nothing. Like, Obi-Wan pauses and stops to look at the child, the youngling. And there was a close up on his face, and you can see the anguish on his face in that moment where he's looking at the youngling. So to your point, I 100% believe there is something that is going on with children of the Force or children in general in this whole series that they're going to play on before the series is over. I don't think we will find out all of it. I think we're going to find out just enough to close up the story, because Ewan did say at Star Wars Celebration that didn't say, but made some allusions to that they are interested in pursuing or looking into a second season of Obi-Wan.
Oh, it looks like they could. If I'm right, I could have read this wrong, but it sounds like they just got greenlit for it.
Okay, well,
I think that just came out that they got greenlit for a second season.
So I would bet that we're going to learn enough about whatever this means before the end of this series, to mostly satisfy what you're curious about, what I'm curious about, without giving us everything. I think there's going to be something more to it than that, that we're still going to need to watch and find out later. But yeah, I've been very curious. And I also, the other big thing that kind of jumped out to me was when we finally get to see the Inquisitorious, the actual palace, so to speak, of the Inquisitors, where they're trained, where they operate, their base, all that stuff, is that it is in the Mustafar system, yet it's a complete water planet. I found that really interesting, the dichotomy between Mustafar itself, in where the shape of Darth Vader's castle, the look of it on top of a lava flow, and all of these things, and then the Inquisitorious, that's in a water planet that actually goes deep into the water, super, super deep into the water, all of that. Like, it was, that dichotomy to me was really interesting, because they played up on it really heavily. They made a point of talking about it in detail. It goes deep into the water. We don't know anything about it. Obi-Wan has to swim with the breather, just like he did with Obi-Wan back in Phantom Menace. Like, there was a lot of things that brought back connection points from different places to me. But there's more I want to talk about there too, but I'm going to stop for a second because I want to see what else you had to say on the sort of the kids at the beginning and what you're kind of maybe thinking about that.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Like, I feel like if it was another series with the different producers and writers, I'd be like, I know when someone's just trying to pull an emotion out of me. And I've seen that on like a lot of shows. Like, a really good example of a show that's done that in a way where it's almost hard to buy in sometimes is another Star Trek show, which is Star Trek Picard. I see that Rich just joined us. Hey, Rich. Star Trek Picard has a lot of it's like, oh yeah, here's this trauma, here's that trauma. And it almost is like, guys, like, you're just doing this to try to make things emotional. And when you try to make things emotional, they're not. When you try to force in meaning, it doesn't work. It sticks out like a sore thumb in the story. Nobody buys it, and it becomes and it can become melodramatic, which is even worse. It's like, it becomes something that you mock. This, I'm suspending my disbelief because I have some theories on what I think this is about. I think that Reva, I think this has a lot to do with the Reva character. I think that this has everything to do with that character. And again, I could be wrong. These are my theories. And these can't be spoilers. These are potential spoilers if I'm right. But, I'll give it 50-50 odds. Riva says I'm going to get back what I'm owed. There's all of these things that she wants that she feels owed. And I think that has everything to do with her background. I would be really disappointed if it was, oh, I just want to like have a better position among the Inquisitors.
No.
Like, I don't think it's that.
Well, there's a
I
reason
think,
why they refer to her by her name, and none of the
yes.
others get referenced by their name at all.
Yeah, and so I really think that the crux of this, all of the intersecting lines would be to Riva. And I think, did you say that you were getting like Trilla vibes
Oh, definitely.
when we were talking with
100%.
Brandon? For those of you who do a YouTube search for Trilla, what is it, Fallen Order?
Jedi Fallen Order. Yeah.
Yeah, Jedi Fallen Order. That character's amazing.
Yes.
That character's amazing. It's a video game, but it has amazing cutscenes because it's real actors that acted out those scenes and then they were just animated. It reminds me of, if you like, Ralph Bakshi's Lord of the Rings, which was animated. They like filmed people and then they just animated over the top of it, like rotoscoped it. If I think. I think that's what they called it, and that the Riva character gives me the same vibes. Like, I think all of these storylines, I won't be surprised if she is the reveal is her trauma as a youth, which we've already had some theories about what that is. I think that goes right back to that very first episode of what we see in the Jedi Temple and the younglings. But yeah, like I will say that there are at times I've just questionable decisions in this story. I remember thinking at one point, while Leia is being interrogated on where Jedi might be, which I'm sitting there thinking, like, why would Leia know any of this? I felt like, oh, this is just so that way, we can feel the threat to Leia. But I'm already there. Like, you don't need to like put more gas down. Like, it's all brakes and no gas on the threats to Leia. It's like, I get it. She's in trouble. Or all gas and no brakes. Sorry, all gas and no brakes. But the thing that I kept thinking was this questions that Riva got at Leia's age. And so I started to really put a lot of thought into that. And I hope that's because that would then, you can't just have like abject, like terrible, evil, and peril and all these things and not have it connect to something. So I'm very hopeful that it is connecting to something. I think that they've put enough seeds in there to get it to come around. And I think it even goes back to that line, I'm looking for my daughter. I was somebody's daughter too. I think there could be something there.
Yeah, I totally agree. One of the theories I've had about Riva, a few different theories I've had about her character, but I'll go into one of them here in a second. But I'm with you that I feel like a lot of this backstory for this arc centers on her trauma, whatever happened to her when she was younger. One of the ones I've been kind of thinking on is that, not that Riva has any direct connection to Obi-Wan. I don't. Maybe that's what it is, but that's not where my mind is going. Where my mind is sort of going is that Riva was a youngling, not a youngling, Padawan. It's only been 10 years, so it's not been that long. Either she was a youngling or a Padawan, and it could be really either. If she's a Padawan, then she suffered through the fall. The one thing that's been triggering for me more than anything else is maybe an idea that Riva was young and got passed over by one of the Jedi Seekers, or whatever the term for the Jedi, the Jedi who go out there and look for children, got passed over to to be taken to the temple and never actually got trained as a Jedi and went through life just being different and struggling and being probably kicked out of her home because people didn't understand her. She could make things happen with her emotions. The very Harry Potter-esque, like, I make things happen with my emotions because I don't know what power I have. And is eventually picked up by the dark side, hence the gutter trash sort of thing, picked up by the dark side and brought in and is striving to like prove herself because she has to work hard or what have you. And my thinking is that she, at some point, as she was either being trained or before she was picked up by the Inquisitors, during the fall, she saw Obi-Wan's message that don't come back to Coruscant. So I'm just suspecting she may have actually been from Coruscant, and that no one came back to help her. No Jedi was there to help her because Obi-Wan told them to leave. Obi-Wan's message is the one that was on repeat to the Jedi. So either she was a Jedi or she wasn't, but somehow she learned about that. I don't know. That's kind of where I'm going with this, that it's, to your point, that there's some kind of trauma or frustration, because why else would we start the entire series out with her obsession with Obi-Wan? Like, that's the first thing that is called out about her character is by the Grand Inquisitor, is her obsession with Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Yeah,
it's like, okay, well, there's something there, and it's something having to do with kids. Mm-hmm. That's why I think they're definitely going to tug on that, though, I think, or like pull on that thread before the series ends into, the next 2 episodes, because otherwise I think it would be very strange. I think it would be a very weird thing, like, oh, he just saved Leia and life is good and moves on. It's like, no, you told us too many other things here to make this work. And I do trust in the storytellers that we're talking about here, but I'm with you that I think it very much centers around Reva. It's something to do with her youth somewhere, maybe not early age, but sometime in her youth. She's not that old to begin with, like the character isn't, in her 20s or whatever, but something when she was a bit younger.
Yeah, it's actually kind of funny because this was the first time that, of all the episodes, this was the first time that I remember thinking, I wish they only had 5 episodes. And I know that sounds silly because it's like they're covering a lot of ground here, but this was an episode that I almost wanted to be like, let's get to it. I liked the setting. And I understand too, like they're taking their time with Obi-Wan. This was the most Obi-Wan, the most recognizable Obi-Wan that we saw. And again, like this is so reminiscent of so many characters, and it's actually like a really common trope in the Old West, in a lot of Westerns, which is an old marshal that's being kind of pulled out of retirement, and is they're rough around the edges. They're not the person that they used to be, and they kind of have to find who they were on the job.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know why I didn't think of this example before, but that's very like John Wayne and True Grit. Or if you've only seen the more recent True Grit, that would be Jeff Bridges. Yeah. And which is also, by the way, like a great movie. And so there was Obi-Wan not pulling out his lightsaber, Obi-Wan really getting on the losing end almost immediately of a battle with Darth Vader, and then Obi-Wan really looked more like himself. And I don't mean that just from like an action adventure. I mean, he seemed more self-assured. Mm-hmm. Obi-Wan always had that, hello there type of vibe, where he was a character that was like a little bit of a swashbuckler. The same type of character that's like, trying to convince Luke to go to Alderaan. I'm getting too old for this kind of thing. Cutting off, people, pulling out a lightsaber and hitting people in a bar, that kind of thing, And this Obi-Wan doesn't seem like that up until I would say this episode. But I still think, like, I almost feel like they got too much time. Because a thing happened that I don't like, which is Obi-Wan escapes Darth Vader in episode 3. Like, he gets set on fire, and then he escapes. And I was like, okay, that's cool. Everybody gets one. But then in this episode, he escapes again. Now, they're kind of like, oh well, we let him go, but Vader didn't know that. And that's where I'm like, I almost wish that they only had 5 episodes, because they gotta get, they've got all the pieces now. They've got the setting. They've got Obi-Wan acting more like Obi-Wan. He's holding his lightsaber, like very classic Jedi. Now I would say I've got all my high hopes pinned on this next episode, because I liked a lot of what I saw here, and I loved the setting, and the underwater stuff was just amazing. But now from a story perspective, I'm like, you guys got to start paying off. You guys have built it up. Let's go. Let's do this.
Yeah, I definitely don't want to wait till episode 6 before we see the real payoff to that part of the story. And yes, I'm totally with you. I noticed the way that it kind of triggered for me in this last episode, in Obi-Wan becoming Obi-Wan, like Obi-Wan sort of finding him, finding himself. It very much reminded me of a thread in a movie that I'm actually not a big fan of at all, but this thread resonated, which was the second Alice in Wonderland with Johnny Depp. In that, when she comes back to Wonderland, I think maybe it's the second one, maybe it's the first one. In one of the Alice in Wonderlands, the Johnny Depp versions of them in the more recent years, Alice gets to Wonderland, and when she meets the caterpillar, he's like, "You're not Alice," and follows that thread kind of throughout the entire story. And periodically, when she runs back into him again, he's like, "Yeah, kind of Alice." A little bit later, "I think you're mostly Alice," and basically implying that she's finally accepting who she actually is. She's remembering who she is. She's accepting the things around her. She's not just being cynical and ignoring everything. And I very much see that type of story element or tool being played out in this show, where in this episode, in episode 4, he very much showed a progression from the previous episodes of, like, he's starting to kind of remember the Obi-Wan that he is, or the Obi-Wan he used to be. That person is still in there. Actually, Bail making the comment that even got him on this whole journey. Others making the comment to get him to actually act and do things with them and go to the Inquisitorious, and like him being willing to even do it. Like in episode 4, being willing to go to that planet to visit the Inquisitorious. Episode 1, there's no way he would have done that. He's like, "I'm not going to some planet. Like, it's never going to happen." And now by episode 4, we've already seen him like, "I got to go. I got to save Leia. I have to go do this." And then his dueling, his use of the Force to hold the water back when the glass is breaking. Not that any.
I love that. I by the way, that was like one of my favorite scenes.
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
That, any like inventive uses of the Force, I'm always a big fan of. And when that glass is cracking and he's like using the Force to like hold the water back, I loved it.
It was so cool, and I loved it individually, but I also loved all the individual pieces put together. Not that any one of them was immensely impressive. Like, they were beautiful to see that happen. Like, oh, cool, fan service, so to speak. Like, you gave us a Force ability. But more for me, it was the putting them all together in his Jedi robes. Like, maybe not his, but after he came out of the Bacta tank, he's now wearing essentially what amounts to like a Jedi tunic. It's still his old pants, but like what amounts to or similar to a Jedi tunic. And he's connecting enough, almost like it's a reaction to the Force and to his lightsaber abilities to protect Leia and to get them out of there. And it reminds me of, I think I brought this up in one of our previous episodes about the show. In the book Master and Apprentice, towards the end, when Obi-Wan is talking to Qui-Gon, and I think it's near the end of the book, the main climax has already happened, and he kind of presses Qui-Gon, doesn't press him, but Qui-Gon says, "Do you know why I never allowed you to, or I haven't allowed you to train in the like more advanced saber techniques, but I've kept you you thought I've always kept you at the basics?" And Obi-Wan's like, "Wait, what? Well, we're talking about this now? Oh, yeah, I always did wonder that." And Qui-Gon's basically Qui-Gon's wording to him, and I'm paraphrasing heavily here, was essentially, "I wanted you to be so comfortable in the base, in the fundamentals, that they became part of your nature, and that nothing could ever disrupt that. So no matter what happened in defense and attack, anything, you would just do it out of muscle memory. It was just core to who you were. You didn't have to ever think about it. It just happened. The advanced techniques are flashy and they're fun and they're enjoyable and they're cool to watch. But the basics are the thing that are going to carry you on and on and on and on all of the time." And this episode 4, harkened back to that conversation to me a lot because it made me realize the basics for him, the fundamentals are still there. He just needs to allow himself, like Alice, to see them. He needs to allow himself, like Alice, to remember this is who you are. No matter what you are trying to do, doesn't mean you don't have to be yourself. You can still be you, but you have to find a right way to channel it. And this episode to me was like, he didn't go all out. It wasn't like, look, I'm Obi-Wan now, had my duel with Vader, boom, let's go. It wasn't that, because it's not earned. That would not have been earned in any way, shape, or form. He has to get there. And even by episode 6, he won't be there. Like, he won't fully, I don't think he'll ever actually fully be back there because of what's going on with him in general. But I think by episode 6, I'm hopeful what they do is he's like 70%. Or something, metaphorically, something along those lines that indicates he is on a path to recovering to the person he was before by processing trauma and doing what he needs to do. He's never going to be 100% because he's getting older and he's got trauma in his life. So he's knocked down a little bit as a result, no matter what. But I think he's getting back to where he needs to be, like Alice. And I really do appreciate that because you've used this phrase before, it makes that story element feel earned. Like he's having to go through things to get there. It's not obvious. It's not overt. Or I shouldn't say not obvious. It's not overt, but we're seeing it and it makes us feel enriched as we watch this. And I really do appreciate that.
Yeah, I agree. I actually keep thinking of the reverse statement in episode 3. Obi-Wan and Darth Vader, which, by the way, I remember when the Star Wars Episode 3 movie came out, and I remember a lot of people being upset because it was Anakin and Obi-Wan having a fight. The climactic duel was not a robotic Anakin, and that people wanted that. And now this series has given people exactly what they wanted, which is a duel. They got it in episode 3. But right when they're about to fight, Obi-Wan, in a very, kind of resigned way, says, "What have you become?" And Vader responds, "I am what you made me." And I thought about how, of all the things, like, that's not just like, yeah, man, like, I had the high ground and I took your arm and your legs and let you burn on the side of a river of lava. I really think that was everything else. That Obi-Wan was his mentor for 25, almost 20 years. And I think that the same goes for Obi-Wan, that Obi-Wan is this kind of like broken guy. And it's like, look what you've become. And it's like, well, this situation is that's what's made him. So yeah, I do hope, I really want to see a transition though, of like where Obi-Wan becomes, and I know this is going to sound crazy, but it's like Alec Guinness plays him as like kind of a lovable scamp. He's a troublesome dude, but he's like a lovable scamp. The little like shine in his eye and his smile, like, I always liked the Obi-Wan character in A New Hope. It was, he's a solid mentor. And even though he's lying to Luke all the time, he's a solid mentor. And I'd like to get somewhere there. I don't need I'm going to drop down among General Grievous and fight General Grievous and all of his troops at the same time. I actually need that. I need to see the character make the other transition, which is someone who is older, wiser, and patient. Mm-hmm. Someone who isn't so, someone that's not broken, but hopeful. And there are moments there where you see that. I will say that there was a visual thing in this episode that was like one of my favorite, that was like a great Star Wars moment. And you don't get those every now and then. Like in the last episode, we had a Star Wars moment, which was that duel was really interesting. But in this episode, there was an amazing visual Star Wars element. I was going to ask you, Jeff, as a part of this transition, was there one thing that was your favorite thing that was in this episode 4?
That's a good question. So I think the thing that stands out to me the most is not an Obi-Wan moment. It's a very Cassian Andor moment
Hmm.
when the actress who's playing, I forget her name, the actress from Game of Thrones, she's the one who kind of gets them in. She sneaks into various places, and at one point she's at a console, and a commander comes up to her and says, "Come with me," and she walks off with him, and basically beats him up and knocks him out, and then comes back to her desk.
Yes.
And then a little bit later, where she's like, "Oh, I gotta make a distraction," and so she basically gets Riva called to a room, and Riva calls her out of being online, and she stands up to it. She does it so well and so convincingly, even when she falters a little bit, she still catches up and makes up for it. And I loved it for a couple of reasons. One, because I love seeing characters like that are not just Jedi or Sith, that are just different. I love seeing characters that can, like we see with the High Republic comics and with others too, where characters that can manipulate a Jedi or a Sith without having any Force abilities. And it helps you remember that those other characters are not invulnerable. They're not immune to the things that other real people are immune have to deal with too. Like, just because they can tap into the Force doesn't mean they're immune to being manipulated or things like that. And I love seeing it because it reminds you they are, I hate to use the phrase they are human, but they are vulnerable, as are the rest of us. They are perceived to have more capabilities than many of us, and it's true in one sense, but it's also not true in a variety of other senses, because when you see this, you are reminded very quickly that they can be tweaked and tuned and manipulated just like anybody else can, even by somebody who doesn't have a Force ability. That's part of it. But I also love seeing characters like hers that, again, show that there are real people. I mean, we see it all over the Inquisitorious. Imperial imps kind of walking everywhere. Shouldn't say that. It's from all the books. That's terrible slang from the books. But Imperial is walking around everywhere from the Navy and various places doing their thing. And I love seeing that because it's very much like if this was a spy movie and the saber duelists weren't here, this is what a spy movie would be all about. This would be the James Bond sort of moment right here. And that's a very misogynistic concept because she's not a man, but like the ultimate spy sort of moment where that person gets caught but then gets out of it because of something else that happens. And I really appreciate that because it one shows that these two women, these two actors confronting each other are amazing in that dialogue that they have, but also that it's not just a man's world, so to speak, in these movies and these stories and these shows. And it doesn't always have to just be the quintessential character in the show, Obi-Wan Kenobi, that is getting the moments, that has the arc, because it's not just him. Honestly, I would really say, now that I'm saying this out loud, I really believe this show's not really about Obi-Wan. It's about all the people he's affecting along the way in the story. From Leia, he's helping Bail and his wife. He has an effect on Riva. We can clearly see she is obsessed, if not fanatical, about finding Obi-Wan for some reason we're going to hopefully discover soon. And the other people that are around him who are trying to help him as well. The story's actually kind of more about them. And I feel like when this story wraps up, what's likely to happen is a lot of implications or a lot of the story implying that all of these people around Obi-Wan he's almost kind of his story or his moving through this has almost sort of been like the domino in the first domino in a Rube Goldberg machine that's going to set off a whole bunch of things that may or may not have been set off in the way they are, but they did because of his actions. And I think that's really important because it reminds us that the Star Wars stories are not just about Jedi. That's what we think about a lot. I got a couple lightsabers right back here. Which we think about. They're fun, of course. The whole idea of that's really cool. The powers of the Force and all these things. But they make up a tiny percentage of the population of the galaxy. Most sentient beings are not Force sensitive. They're the real creatures and beings and people who live in this galaxy, and they make up the bulk of the stories as you could imagine if it was a real thing. And I love seeing that. I love these little reminders that is actually the case. Because then when shows like Cassian Andor come out or The Mandalorian and others, you can get even more excited about those characters because you can really connect with that character. Not that you can't connect with parts of Obi-Wan or other Jedi or Sith, but it's so much easier to connect with somebody who's actually got the same capabilities that you have. I can't use the Force. Like, I can't really duel with a real lightsaber. Okay, I can connect with other parts of those characters, but I can't connect with them in a lot of ways. But I can connect with Leia. I can connect with Bail in various pieces and points. And I appreciate that they're doing that in this show.
Yeah, and I mean, I will say that like I'm a sucker for all the Jedi stuff. Like, I'm not gonna lie. Like, I think we had a one of our guests that's been on the show here. Oh yeah, see, one of the guests that's been on our show here, Joanna, has talked about magic in the world. Like, that's a part of this being like again like a space fairy tale a
Mm-hmm.
long, long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. It's definitely a fairy tale, and fairy tales have knights and pirates and princesses and all these things. You know, there are times where it's like very Arthurian, and I really enjoy a lot of those stories. That said, there's a lot of characters that I've like Han Solo. Jeez Louise, I mean Han Solo is like one of my favorites. R2D2. R2D2 is like a robot, and he is my favorite character. If I could have like an R2 right now, like 100% would have that.
They sell them at Galaxy's Edge. You can just go buy one for, I don't know,
Oh,
$25,000
I mean,
or something.
Jeff knows this. When I went to Galaxy's Edge, R2 like wheeled over to me, and I like talked to R2. Like I've heard, this is gonna sound silly. I've heard that when people are on the set of like Sesame Street, they'll talk to Big Bird or they'll talk to Elmo, and kids do it without even thinking. It doesn't even matter if the puppeteer is like right there. They will talk directly to the. That's how I was dealing with R2, and that was like a robot. But yeah, like you know, he's not force sensitive, so it's cool. But I've always been a sucker for the Jedi stuff, and I will say that one of the things I really liked about this episode, for those of you who have watched it reminded me of one of my favorite scenes in episode 2, which is the light show that can happen when you play a lightsaber against the dark. And that is when, yeah, I really enjoyed this. They're in a room where the floor itself is like very reflective. I remember when there was a behind the scenes documentary that came out about episode 2. And those behind the scenes documentaries are hilarious because oftentimes it's being done by people who are like, oh, what we're building is gold. It's going to be gold. But there was one thing that I really liked, which is they talked about how, well, we have Obi-Wan and Anakin and Yoda all having a lightsaber battle with Count Dooku. And we really wanted to do something different for each one of them. And when we got to Anakin, George Lucas is on set and he says, what I wanted to do was play with light and darkness. And that's why they filmed it with the lightsabers kind of moving up and the glow of the light. There's this really great shot of Count Dooku kind of spinning his lightsaber above him. It's all like kind of red. And it isn't a acrobatic lightsaber. It's every frame a portrait kind of a thing. It's a very beautiful thing, and it's something that I had never seen before done in a Star Wars movie. And that's what this moment in episode 4 looked like. I think that Star Wars is its best when it is an event, when it shows you something you've never seen before, when those stars streak back and you jump to hyperspace. That is Star Wars. And for a moment there, when that room was dark and the floor is reflective, and Obi-Wan's lightsaber is activating and he's taking out the stormtroopers, I was like, this is Star Wars. Like, and not like one of those like terrible fans that'll be like, oh, this is Star Wars and that's not Star Wars. But what I mean is like cinematic. And this was a thing that I said earlier, is that the show, I wish the show had a cinematic budget. That was cinematic. That was Star Wars.
There was a lot of parallels there with the scene at the end of Mandalorian season 2 when Luke came in and was doing his thing with his lightsaber. Like there's a lot of parallels in that sort of, your word, cinematic sort of play there. I wanted to get to Joanna's comment here because I think this is really interesting, that Obi-Wan had to contend with fire, metaphor equals passion. And in episode 4, the first He first awakes in a bacta tank and then has to swim through deep water, metaphorically, in motion. It's really interesting that you pulled that up, Joanna, because I don't think I actually thought about it that way. But now that you say that, it seems almost obvious that that would be the case. I really love, too, in that bacta tank, whether they're actually connected to one another or not, I don't know. But almost like the dyad, so to speak, between Rey and Kylo Ren. But to at least see the two of them side by side, probably not at the same time, but like having these Force visions, it reinforced for me that Obi-Wan's been repressing his trauma and his emotions and these things for so long, but getting burned and confronting Vader made him forced him to have to reckon with it really fast. And in the bacta tank, he's having this nightmare of it happening. And at the same time, we see Vader dealing with the exact same thing. But what I'm reminded of is Vader has been going through this a lot longer than Obi-Wan.
Yeah.
He's had no choice but to face his trauma every single day, all of the time. He wears a suit. He has no limbs other than, the basics. He's got no limbs anymore. Like, he's in a bacta tank basically every time he's back on Mustafar, just trying to heal himself even a little bit to regain anything. Like, it was an interesting counter to each other to watch that happen. And then, to your point, Joanna, to watch Obi-Wan, then also the nightmare ends. He opens his eyes and he can climb out of the bacta tank on his under his own power. Vader can't. I thought it was a very much sort of like, I'm dealing with it with you. I'm dealing with it with you. Stop. I'm going to get up and walk away from this. And Vader can't do that. To me, it was a really interesting reinforcement that Obi-Wan has choices here. Vader doesn't believe he has any choice. He's stuck where he's at and he's dealing with this. And that's the difference between Obi-Wan and Vader in this moment. I don't know if that's a great thing or a bad thing, but it's an interesting distinction between the two characters in that moment.
Yeah, I gotta say, I'm just I'm really digging the things that Joanna's bringing up in this. First, I thought of like the river Styx. And by the way, like Joanna's probably knows this a lot better than I do, but I was thinking about when he's coming out of the water, like when they gotta go and save Han Solo in Return of the Jedi, they have to go to the underworld to go and get them, the gangster underworld, but then it's really like a metaphorical underworld. That's why Jabba's palace is like gross and it's like hellish, is that they have to go and like retrieve the soul of their friend and bring him back. And that's kind of like I thought of that too with the rebirth almost of like going through the bacta tank and then having to swim through the depths so that way he could go and reclaim this soul Leia that's been taken. But then I started thinking of Avatar: The Last Airbender, which regular viewers of this show know is a very favorite show of mine. And I was thinking about how, I could see how episode 1 might be Earth. He's in the sand. He's got to retrieve his lightsabers from there. And how episode 2, he's got, all Leia asks of him is to make it so she can float. And he pulls her up and makes her float. I'm thinking air. I'm thinking earth, air, fire, and water. Maybe the 5th episode we get to is like a Fifth Element type thing, where Obi-Wan is able to, hit some type of actualization. But yeah, I liked a lot of the play there. I really liked the use of. I've enjoyed the use of the bacta tank as just not a story framing device. I feel like that was overused in the Boba Fett show, but I like it as a setting. I think it looks cool. And to have the parallel, we're talking about kind of like the dyad, like the parallel between Vader and Obi-Wan, both getting through that. But yeah, and Joanna's bringing up the fifth element could be his spirit or the Force. I think that is the big secret that Obi-Wan is trying to get to, by the way, which is the whole, like, he's talking to Qui-Gon. He's trying to call in all of these things that he can't connect with, which is, which really, it's like Aang in The Last Airbender. Aang can't become an actualized avatar until he unlocks all of these chakras that are running through him. And one of the biggest ones that he has is shame. because he wasn't there to say, he ran away, and while he was away, his entire people were massacred, and he carries around a lot of guilt and a lot of shame. And when he is able to let that go, he's able to actualize and become that fifth element. The as I think as Jodorowsky talked, the inkle. You know, it's that thing that's beyond the physical space.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I hope that that is what happens, because that would fit in line with what the heck is this? Look, everybody, watch the show, man. It's the first season's rough, but second season and third season are like unbelievably good.
I have an idea. Joanna, this is how we're going to stay connected. You're going to come on the show very often. We're going to do a separate one that's all about the Airbender, the Last Airbender. Well, let's just set up a Discord channel, and we could just go ahead and get on there and do watch parties with the Last Airbender and then the Legend of Korra and all of that. Like, see, this could be just basically like a spin-off of the Kessel chat and turn it into like the fantasy show videos that we do, because there's so many of them. I'm telling you,
I could easily do this. We could make this we could make this the Jasmine, what is it? What's Uncle Iroh's tea shop, the Jasmine Dragon or something. But yeah, I really think that that's where that has to go, because I think the trick to all of this is, and again, Jeff, I know that this is a world that's definitely bigger than the Jedi, but I think that the Jedi's story is one of surrendering yourself to the Force.
Agreed.
That and that's a thing that you hear in Rogue One. I'm with the Force is with me. I'm with the Force, and the Force is with me. Which, by the way, is like a really powerful scene for those who have seen that amazing. That's amazingly shot. It's great actors. That idea that you can't bend the Force to your will, that you have to just be one with the Force is to just kind of let yourself go into it. And that means that you also, it's like what Morpheus tells Neo in the Matrix: fear, doubt, you got to let it all go, Neo. Obi-Wan has to let it all go. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where we're kind of getting to. And I think that's also where it's like, he's got to even let go of, I have to be here for Luke, and I have to do this. He's still thinking in the old way. And he's in a new world now, and he's actually got to be thinking outside of that. The Jedi Order's not going to come back, and you know what? It probably shouldn't. It has, all of these things have cycles of rising, renaissance, decline, and rebirth. And I think that he's on that side of it. And I would love for the next 2 episodes to deal with that. Not just, I need a rope swinging Obi-Wan who's going to come in like Errol Flynn and be all like crazy, like heroic. No, I don't need that.
No.
I just need payoffs on some of these things.
Yeah, it wouldn't be right for his character anyway. No, I'm with you. As you were describing this, the way I was thinking about it is sort of, it's almost like this is a quintessential example of what happens when a Jedi falls. No, not falls. Loses their way. They don't automatically become. You don't like automatically become a Sith. You don't automatically become a Darksider. But when you lose your way, and you lose your understanding of why you allow yourself to connect to the Force and why you let go of a lot of the materialistic things you have, there's a reason for those things. As much as the dogma of the Jedi was outdated, and actually it's very likely what got I believe very heavily, that is what got the Jedi to the place of declining so far that Sidious was ever able to take over. That dogma hindered them terribly. Whereas, in the High Republic, we see that actually the dogma isn't really like the hard and fast that we see in the Skywalker saga. But this is an example to me of like, this is what happens when a Jedi loses that path and they kind of go into shadow. They go into fog. They don't just become a dark side user. You don't just go, well, I've lost my way from the light, which means I'm automatically in the dark, and I've just decided I'll use dark side powers. Like, that's not that's too binary. That's not how that plays out. And it's also not, and I hate the term gray Jedi. I really do not like that term at all, because to me, the gray idea is the blending of dark and light, darker colors and lighter colors. That means they're willing to dabble in the dark. Well, Obi-Wan's not. He has no interest in dabbling in the dark. Qui-Gon never had an interest in dabbling in the dark. He just didn't want to follow the dogma, because the dogma didn't always take him to the place he knew was right in his heart. But he wasn't tapping into the dark side to do that. He wasn't doing
Yeah.
villainous things That's not what Obi-Wan's doing either. He's just lost his path. And through these, I'm hopeful that what we're going to see is him regain it, in so much that we all see and Obi-Wan recognizes who he actually is. I don't think they need to recover him. He doesn't need to be, I've reconnected and now I'm the Obi-Wan from pre-Clone Wars. No, we don't. None of us need to see that. What we are hopeful to see is he becomes a whole person again, or at least enough that he can see what's going on and can make like cognitive choices without the distortion in front of him, and he's going to start making better choices going forward. But I don't need to see a completely recovered Obi-Wan. Like that's not who he is. He doesn't need to be that anytime soon. Like maybe enough to train Luke when Luke's a little bit older, but that's not what we need right now. We just need to see him. I don't even want to call it a redemption arc, because he didn't fall from grace. He was doing the job, but
Yeah.
he's reconnecting with who he actually is.
Yeah, and I think what you're talking about, which is actually a really cool story trope, is the loss of one's faith and the recovery of it. And that isn't often a religious faith. Sometimes it's just the faith in oneself.
Yeah.
And again, I know that I've brought this up a bunch of times, and I'm sorry that I keep bringing this movie up. And I'm not going to say it's not problematic, because it is crazy problematic. The movie The Searchers, which stars John Wayne, and it is directed by John Ford. It is a problematic movie. Jeffrey Hunter is in it. The original Captain Pike. See, we went full circle back to Strange New Worlds. Natalie Wood is in it, and The Searchers is not just about two men searching for a kidnapped woman. It is the work that goes into recovering one's soul. And again, I'm not talking about that in any type of religious motif. I want to think of soul as like the literary soul, like the essence of the human. John Wayne's character in that movie, it becomes a bit of a monster, and in a way that is almost unexpected, in a way that on the verge of his greatest success, he's about to destroy it. It is a painful story to see, but then right there at the end, he finds his faith, and it's a scene that I don't know how to describe it. And again, it's problematic, and it's definitely a movie of its day. But he does. There's this thing he does, and it's John Wayne's best acting scene. Like he won an Academy Award for True Grit, but this is really like peak John Wayne, and he's not a good actor. He plays John Wayne in every movie. This is though a peak John Wayne, and it's right there at the end. And you see him make this recover. He recovers his humanity, and he recovers his faith in who he is. And then at the end, it is a long, like 3-minute shot, which if the Obi-Wan story ends this way, I'll be like 100% on board. This was great. Again, I'm not saying watch The Searchers, because I know a lot of people are going to be like, this movie is at times out and out racist, terrible. I'm just saying that as someone who loves film, man, is that movie bringing up a lot of parallels that I think could also be happening here. I'd also point out things like I feel like they're pulling a lot of like the Jodorowsky stories.
Mm.
There is a graphic novel that Jodorowsky did, using he was gonna make a version of Dune, which would have been insane. And anybody that knows Jodorowsky, he's like he has like dogma films. He's like they're like crazy movies. They're like insano movies, but it's an acquired taste. It's like ketchup on caviar. That's how acquired it is. But he did a graphic novel called The Inkle, and that has been used to make things like The Fifth Element. Like The Fifth Element is really taking everything from The Inkle, and this story of someone who is finding their faith in a faithless land, which is where Obi-Wan is. In The Inkle, it's set in some like crazy long far from now future. In westerns, it's set in the past.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's a trope of westerns. I would say most often westerns, which is the finding of one's faith on the frontier.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, this has been fantastic. And we've got 2 more episodes of Obi-Wan coming up next week and the week after. Just so everyone watching, we are not going to be live streaming next week because Ryan and I will not be in town. We'll both be either still on the road or traveling home, but no show next week. We will catch up on Obi-Wan episode 5 the week after, but can probably at the same time. And we probably have to do a couple episodes to wrap this thing up because there's still so much going on. But it's been fantastic, man. This has been It's been good. I'm glad we were able to, even though we got through the kids stuff that we needed to get through. I'm glad that there is the arc is making the natural turn that it needs to. We're gonna find out hopefully about that other stuff soon. But yeah, this was a good. I think this was a good one for us to kind of go through. We needed this episode. I think we really needed this part of the story to be able to get to the next piece. I've seen some messages online that are indicating like, oh, this was just a bridge episode. This is just one of those like this throwaway episodes. I'm like, absolutely not. Like, no. It served a lot of very important purposes for the story. It was the shortest episode, but I think that was okay. I think it was actually a little bit shorter may have even been better because as much as I would have loved to see more in the episode, this was one that needed to happen fast. This was the, this is not the Ocean's 11, but the sort of like the quick take shot that needs to happen. This, cool. We're done. We move on. It needs to happen that way, I think, for it to be affected. Because otherwise, if it took longer, it would have had to have been much longer than it was. Like to do it well, if it was going to be longer, it would have to be like an hour and 15 minutes. But to me, it was either go short or go way long. But there was no middle ground because you wouldn't be able to do it service, or you would make things go too long and it wouldn't work. So.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I will say this. I'm glad that we talked about the thing about the vulnerability of young people that we keep seeing in this universe that they focused on in every episode. I'm glad we started there. I like you. I have a belief that is they're trying to get to a message there, that there's something that they want to say. Now, I will say this, Jeff, if you're interested in seeing how Star Trek is handling this, and I will say that episode is very, very hard to watch. Episode 6 of Strange New Worlds is something. It's a hard episode to watch, but its message is there is a deep message there around what they're talking about. And it's a very similar thing to what we talked about at the beginning of this episode. So I would 100% recommend. I would recommend watching all of Strange New Worlds. I'm not trying to like Trek and Wars this. I'm just trying to say I'd 100% watch it. It's an amazing show. But this latest episode has left me. It's hard to watch. It was hard for me to walk away from. But I knew what message it was. And again, when you're done watching that episode, search Strange New Worlds. Episode 6, literary reference, and then read the short story that this episode is based on. It is something that short story has stuck with me for years. It's sitting right here on my shelf, right over there. And it has always been something that I've thought about. And there's a real message there, especially when we think about the vulnerable people in our society. So yeah, I think we're it's a bevy, it's a host of really great shows right now, Jeff. I feel so great because we have so much to choose from.
We totally do. All right, everybody, thanks for being here. We appreciate it. And when catching on this in the replay, thank you for being here too. We appreciate you. Have a wonderful one, and we'll see you in 2 weeks. Enjoy Kenobi. We'll see you.
Bye, everybody.